Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Multipliers Leadership Podcast. Man, we are so excited to be able to have you back with us today. My name is Joseph Elder, and I get the privilege of being on this podcast. And we're joined with our co-host today, which is the founder of Multiply Global. It's Josh Folliart. He's going to be joining us today. And then we also get the privilege to be able to hear from really somebody that has tracked along with Multiply really since day one. And she is an incredible leader, one that you want to follow. But she's also got an entrepreneurial heart and happens to be with one of the companies that produces the best coffee in the world and my personal favorite coffee shop in Onyx. And so we're going to welcome to the podcast, Niki Weegens.
Hey there. Great to be here.
Niki, we are so grateful, so honored that you take some time just to visit with us. And you have been around. And you've been with Multiply since day one, like Joseph said. And we're just, gosh, there's so many directions we could go today, and I'm really hoping that the people listening to this get just a brief but profound snapshot of who you really are, because it's a fascinating story, and you're a fascinating gal. And so thanks again for being here. But I have to start with a question. I was snooping on your website this morning before this, just to, familiarize myself with all your pictures and all stuff. So tell me the story of Mr. James Ding. I have to know the background. So
that's how we're starting today, everybody. That's how we're starting.
Self-professed has an obsession with her cat. Tell us a little bit about Mr. James Ding.
Oh my gosh, I could go on and on. I could spend the entire podcast on this. No, so Mr. James Ding is one of my cats who I would say he found us. He found our family. I think sometimes pets have a way of doing that, but my husband and I found him actually living out of a dumpster.
Wow.
And he was just in a parking lot, and I saw him, and my husband Jesse was like, "No, we are not getting another cat."
That's my most common answer to animals in my house currently. No.
Yep. But we kept seeing him, so it was several weeks of him just like continuing to be around, and he would always like approach us, and he was just the super sweet but wild cat. And I remember telling Jesse, like, hey, we don't have to take this cat for ourselves, but we've got to at least get him attended to, take him to the vet. He deserves a better life than living out of a dumpster. Yeah. And within 30 seconds of us, like, having him and being around him and him, like, being present with us and our family, it very quickly was like, okay, I think maybe there's a place for him in our family. And it was really, really cool because he went from, like, a totally wild, like, unsocialized cat to now being, like, my precious baby who, sleeps next to my head every night and is just super sweet. And we call him James Ding because he's a little bit of a dingus. He doesn't have that much of a brain, but he's really cute.
Man, the way you described him sounds almost like my kids. A little bit wild at the beginning. We're trying to train them.
They sleep next
to us and being okay.
Yep.
That's great.
I love that story because you are so kind to all creatures, and including just the people that you get to be around. And I love that. So on a more serious note, although that's a very serious note, and I love that.
That's pretty important, Josh. I think that's a good spot to start.
Onyx, you have found yourself in this, I say new, but it's not super new, but it's somewhat new in your world, this role with Onyx Coffee Lab. And I'm a huge fan, as we stated earlier. We love Onyx Coffee. Yes. My parents actually owned a coffee shop in downtown Van Buren, and we served Onyx Coffee of all the different coffee. Like we know what the best is. So you found yourself in a role. Tell us about, give us your title, but then tell us kind of what your role is and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. So I am the director of social media and primary content creator for Onyx. And Onyx is not just a coffee shop, but is one of the largest and most esteemed brands in the specialty coffee world right now. So they have hundreds of wholesale partners all around the world. And it's a huge honor for me to be able to kind of help serve as the link between the leadership and their vision and what they want to express to the public, and then the end consumer, the people who are engaging with Onyx as a brand online, as well as consumers just purchasing their coffee. So The story of how I got plugged in with Onyx and how I kind of got into the role that I have now is one that's very exciting to me and something that feels like really, really a significant part of my, just like my life story. Because it's been something that, like you mentioned, Josh, it's like a newer thing, kind of officially being in this capacity. It's been about 15 months now, but it's been a long journey kind of getting to a place of being both ready in my like skill, but also just like ready as a person to be in a role that like I view as being a very important role, not even just from like a business sense, but just like personally to me, I'm doing meaningful work that feels like kind of what I was, born to do. And for the first time in my life, really feel like I'm plugged into something that is utilizing, kind of to be like honest, just like my God-given like love and skill set to accomplish work that's, it's not only a career, but it's something that like my heart is engaged in. So I'm super, super excited about it and love that I have the opportunity to do this.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So what is kind of Onyx's, if I could say it like that, what is the vision of Onyx Coffee Lab? Is it about coffee? Is it about more?
It's about coffee, but it's also an acknowledgement that coffee is about people. So Onyx's heart is really to provide the best possible product, coffee, to consumers, but for a reason, not just for, the sake of profit and things like that, but rather taking truly excellent work done by people from all around the world, doing the highest quality of work in the industry. And Onyx is really passionate about helping to take attention away from just a product and helping place it on the people. And partnering with those people to help them do better and better work to create essentially a cycle of improvement all the time. So Onyx, yes, is a coffee roaster, but they're a critical part in kind of shaping what I think is really just going to be like the future of the specialty coffee industry, because they're making, financial investments and relational investments in people and companies who are, doing, like I said, some of the best work in this industry.
That's so good. I think we should state right now, this show is not sponsored by Onyx Coffee, although we would take that sponsorship. But hey, and we'll link this in the show notes. But if you are not following Onyx, man, my encouragement is, man, get on social, follow Onyx, and I'll tell you that, and you'll see it for yourself, that Niki does the best at being able to tell the story, even from the snapshots that you get to see, and that's just a microcosm of the bigger picture of what she gets to be able to do. And Niki, I know that you're a believer. You follow the Lord. That's important to you. Obviously, you're working in a space that's around a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I would love to know kind of two different things. Actually, we'll just start with one. That's probably the best move. Is what's really the most challenging thing about your role, or maybe what you love the most? And maybe you covered that already, but would love to know just kind of a peel behind the curtain. You said you found something you love, but we'd love to know a little bit more on that side.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the greatest challenges for me is really just the like fast-paced nature of this. There's always a lot of really important things that I feel kind of torn between, like, all right, there's so many things that I could turn my attention to. And as well, like really linked to that, I think, because what I view as my role is, the storytelling aspect of something that feels really important and helping to share people's stories. There's a pressure on me to, share the story well and to do it in a way that honors a vision that I really believe in. But to do it quickly and to do it well. But I also really, really love the fact that I get to be plugged in with people who are really different than me.
Right.
Both like locally in the team that I work with, but also, my job takes me literally all over the world. I get to meet people from all different cultures, all different, socioeconomics backgrounds, all kinds of different political backgrounds. The coffee industry is one that is incredibly diverse. I think that this industry is home to a lot of people who feel, maybe on the outside, the fringe of society in times. And I think that that's amazing. To
Yeah.
me, I actually find that it's good for me to be around people who are not just, echoing my own thoughts or beliefs or perspectives.
Yep.
And that's something that
Absolutely.
I've valued for a long time in my life, and find that, I think for a lot of people, it can be challenging to be maybe around a culture that feels like it can be challenging at times. But I actually find it to be really beautiful that I'm in a position where I get to have relationships with people who view things differently than me, and I get to engage in very real conversations with them. So I think for me, like the tie-in, not to get ahead of myself, but like the tie-in of what makes this more than just a job for me is the fact that I think, for me personally, the relationships that I'm able to build with coworkers, with even people that are just like in passing connections, because I have kind of a long game in my view of this. It's like I feel like I'm still on the ground level building relationships, but ultimately, the calling that I feel in my life is to be true to what I believe, and to be someone who can have conversations with someone from any belief system and just be real
Yeah.
about who I am, what I think, the framework that I hold, and the experiences that I've had in my life. So, yeah.
Wow. I've been reading a book called Against the Flow by John Lennox, and it's all about the life of Daniel. And just hearing you talk right now, I just feel like you're like a Daniel. You know, I know you well enough to know you're super anchored in what your convictions are, but that doesn't drive you from society and culture. It drives you into society and culture.
Hmm.
And I just love that so much. And I feel like that's such a missing piece. I think it's a growing piece of the body of Christ, but I
Yeah.
think
Hands
it's
down.
in a
Yeah.
large way, we've marginalized ourselves, and kind of come out of, and I just applaud the way you run into those spaces. And you're definitely one who is salt and light to
Yes.
anyone and everyone around you. So
Thank you.
love it. So grateful for it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I know it's not easy at the same time, and
Yeah.
it's like you said, the pace of the job, the actual work that you do. Can you just take a second and talk about like your work as worship a little bit?
Mhm.
And maybe
Yeah.
that's not phrased super well, but like it's not about, it's not about this ulterior motive in your work. It's literally the work itself is worship and holy
Yeah.
unto God. So just talk about that for a minute.
Absolutely. And I would say like that piece, what you're describing here, is really has been such a critical and empowering part of my experience, my like life story over the last couple of years, because I've had different endeavors, different things in my career that have been, some of them motivated by the financial aspect, some of them
Hmm.
motivated by the, whatever. It could be a number of things. And this is really the first time that I feel that what I'm doing day in and day out truly, like, I think I mentioned this earlier, like I feel my soul in alignment with my calling when I am just doing the everyday work in
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I can even fully explain like why that is, or what it is about the work that feels that way. But I think that there are seasons of life where we're gifted with this, just that something clicks, something, we're given the
Hmm.
opportunity to kind of operate in this space of like, this is what you were created to do. And when I look back on my life, especially like, even looking back into my like young teenage years, I've had a camera at my side, and I've had,
Hmm.
a journal, and, have written blogs and things like that. Like that's who I've been since I was, 12, 13 years old. And I can look back and I can remember engaging in those things and feeling so invigorated and so like aligned with what felt meaningful to me, and having the sense of like, oh, but like I gotta grow up and get a job. And I
Right.
feel
The pressure we all
extremely,
face.
yeah, I feel
Yeah.
extremely blessed that even though it's been a long journey and there have been,
Mhm.
I don't want to minimize the fact that like there were years of time when I was plugged into work that was a little less satisfying.
Yeah.
Um, but what I found is that every season of life that I've gone through and everything that I've done in my work and every relationship that I've made, professionally or whatever, those things shaped me into the person that I am today to
Mhm.
now be in the position that feels, like you're saying, like worship. And I think to me, being in a spirit of worship is simply one in which I feel open and kind of saying like, like, man, when I look up and, kind of metaphorically and I'm like
Yeah.
tuned into like, God, who are you and what do you want for me?
Mm.
The response right now that I feel in my life is this, to
Mm.
to stay plugged into this and knowing that, there may be seasons of life that take me on different paths, but ultimately to just be plugged in and to feel that I'm, doing something that keeps me in a space where my mind is and my heart are set on the things that I feel that matter and that are in alignment with my convictions.
Mhm.
It's like, what more can we ask for in a job?
That's great.
Nothing.
Well,
Beautifully
Nikki,
said.
you said a lot of really profound
Mhm.
things in the midst of that. And I want to camp here for just a second because you've got me intrigued.
Mhm.
And I know there's going to be a lot of listeners that they're going to say, hey, that's great for Nikki that she found the thing she's called to. She's in the
Mhm.
zone and that's her calling. But what would you say to somebody that either they have a future calling they either desire or maybe they're just in the spot they're like, I don't really feel like this is my soul's aligned kind of moment. This is
Yeah.
just a job. What would you say to them?
I mean, I think that they're like I feel like I could write a book about this.
Okay, well,
Maybe
maybe this is
someday.
the time
You
then.
shouldn't
Yeah.
say those things around me, Nikki. You know this.
Yeah, we
um, I really,
worried.
I really think that ultimately everyone goes through seasons.
Mhm.
Mhm,
So kind of like I mentioned, I went through a 7-year season where I was plugged, day in, day out to work it was important and meaningful to me, but it was not something that made me feel the same sense of alignment and um resonance with my calling. It felt
Mm.
like I was kind of having to just push and try to create something for myself, and I don't think that that's bad. I think that there can be seasons where we have to do that.
Mhm.
But now that I'm a little bit more removed from that and I'm in this and I can kind of just look back and reflect on those seasons,
Mhm.
um, the biggest takeaway and the biggest thing I would say to someone, especially if they're struggling with where they are and if they feel kind of this like
Mhm.
tension in this pool of like, I want something else, is um, in those times, especially towards the end of that 7-year period, I had this temptation in my mind to go like, what was this all for?
Mm.
This doesn't even, it feels like I've been putting so much effort into something that isn't even where I ultimately need to be. And now that I've had some distance from that, I can look back and say that those times were actually the greatest gift that I've been given in my life,
Mm.
because the things that hurt me, so to speak, or that I struggled with, were the things that built the very character necessary
mm,
for me to handle the position that I'm in now
Mm.
appropriately.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
the pressure that's on me now, not that it's bad pressure, but like, had I gotten this opportunity to do this 10 years ago, I would not have had the, emotional and even practical fortitude to
Mhm.
engage in this in a way that would make me the person for this job. So
Mm.
I think, to bring it back to your question, is just look for the purpose of where you are in the season that you find yourself.
Mm.
And even if you feel like you can't get it right now, stay patient and just
Yeah.
know
that's
that
good.
like it may be a 7-year period, it may be longer, it
Yeah.
may feel like a lifetime, but ultimately,
Mm.
what I believe and what I found from my own story and my own life is that I believe that God is working everything that I am going through, every person that I meet, every struggle, every opportunity, to build me into the person that I need to be and help me develop the story that I have to share with the people in
That's
my
great.
life. So,
That's so good.
Mhm.
I think that is words of wisdom for anybody, and I think we've either you are in that season, you will be in that season, And it's just a matter of time. It reminds me of being able to do the small things well, so God can entrust you with much, but also the seasons that are there. Josh, do you have something you want to add on
I
that?
was just going to just briefly just say in one of the cohorts that we met this week, we were talking about this exact thing with just a bunch of executives, and every one of them pointed to that what we called a wilderness season or a desert that prepared them for the place they are now, and was like building their insides to have the capacity to carry what they're now carrying.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was the greatest gift, but in that season, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like
Felt like a
discipline.
curse.
It
Yeah.
felt like a curse. And many times things, God's ways seem foolish in the beginning, and then they're wise. And sometimes things that seem wise are actually foolish. And so to shortcut that process would have been such a harm for where you are right now. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful, and I think you worded it beautifully. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that and just letting us know a little bit kind of behind the curtain on that. And I mean, obviously you've had a long journey to kind of get to where you are, but you've also seen us as in the Multiply organization really since day one. And I'd love just to hear even just your perspective of seeing everything with Multiply from day one to now we're over 10 years in. What have you seen or experienced within that time together?
Yeah, I could say so much about this. And when I was kind of thinking through just what I've observed, literally from the day one of Multiply,
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
having been plugged in from the very, very beginning, is ultimately I really believe that so much of what you guys are doing, and I think this has been true from the beginning, is like it is relational. And even
Mhm.
though there is these, there's projects and there's different like action that happens
Mhm.
as part of Multiply, what I've seen that's just been a consistent truth throughout Multiply and also in my own life is that, it's about the people that you are able to connect with, and it's about the
Mhm.
relationships, even before Multiply started. And Josh, you and I had a relationship, and there was a lot of like discipleship and teaching that I gained from being in a relationship with you and the ministries that you and your family have been involved in.
Mhm.
And when I look back on the things that you taught me in those kind of early seasons when I was in college, I was really trying to figure out what life might be. I think so many of the principles that you as a person hold and that getting poured into Multiply as like, okay, we're about reaching people, we're about relationships, we're about developing leaders and people who can make an
Mhm.
impact. Josh, you've been a messenger for that even before Multiply. And
Mhm.
when I look back on my life and when I look back on my own personal development, especially in the early years of my career, and as I was, kind of becoming an independent adult, it was that message that kind of helped put this spark in me of, um, these things that I'm talking about now and this opportunity that I have in my career and in my life and in these relationships that I have, it's like it's really rooted in a lot of these principles that you've carried and you've been teaching all throughout. And so to me, when I look at Multiply and what you guys have done, it's just one of the greatest comments that I can say is that you've been true to your values and you've been true to kind of the mission from the beginning. Every way that Multiply has grown or each new initiative, it's rooted
Mhm.
in the same heart.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that that's such a powerful, powerful thing for people to experience is to just get plugged in, not necessarily with an organization, but with real human people who
Mhm.
have values and who have a desire to invest in people who can then make investments. That's to me the heart that I see in Multiply that like truly gets me excited to continue being plugged in, even as things grow and change over the years.
Love it. Yeah.
That's great, Nikki. I love how you always bring it back to relationship. Obviously,
Mhm.
that's important to us as well. And I know that we're running out of time. We could do this probably all day. Josh, you may have one more question to toss in there, but I think they're one of the most profound things that you said for me personally, as you're even talking about your own role, is I'm playing it for the long game.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, as whether you're a follower of Jesus, whether you're just in the business world and you want to learn more as a leader, playing
Mhm.
the long game is one of the most significant pieces that we can take away, I think, from our conversation today.
Yeah.
Josh, do you have anything else you want to add before we put a bow on this today?
I do. I love that you brought up leaders and leadership, and that word is thrown around so often. So we've kind of even found a little niche and say we like to find uncommon leaders. We also use the word multipliers kind of just interchangeably. And you are certainly an uncommon human being doing uncommon things alongside of God. And he's opening doors, and you've been talk about being true. You have been true. But just there's a lot of people out there who are maybe in that wilderness season. They know that there's something that they're supposed to be and do in their life.
Yes.
And so how would you challenge that kind of leader, that person that feels maybe they feel uncommon, maybe they feel like I'm just different, I don't really fit in, like David was that kind of leader, right?
Yeah.
He was just different. He stood out, set apart, and sometimes that can be a lonely place. But what would you say to those people out there, and how would you challenge them who are trying to live this uncommon calling in maybe a secular space, or maybe not a secular, maybe just in their home,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there are a few pieces of advice or a few things that I would say here, and you're like tag onto that question. Honestly, I think touches on something that's really important. I think one of the greatest pieces of advice that I would say is if you find yourself in a season where you are feeling discontent or you're feeling like you haven't arrived somewhere, I would say take a minute to look around and see who's on that journey with you. Because any moment that you feel alone or isolated, or you feel like you're not in the right place, it's incredibly likely that there are other people around you, maybe even in your own family, maybe people in your work, who need you exactly as you are in this moment, and who can, if you're feeling like you aren't, you're not fulfilling your full calling, or you have so much more potential, my challenge would be, how are you making the most of where you are currently? Because I think we get so eager to experience the seasons, kind of like I'm in right now, of this big alignment, this big, like lots of doors are opening, lots of opportunity. We feel like we're at the beginning of something. It's human nature to crave that, but it's the pressing in, being intentional, and finding peace where you are. Not that you want to like lose your drive to, if you're in a bad spot, or if you need, if God's calling you to something else, like stay tuned into that. But every single day we're presented with opportunities to impact and love the people around us, and plugging into that, no matter where you are, no matter whether you're, doing exactly what you were made to do, or if you're in a season where you're, you truly are living under your potential and you're not doing what you want to do, you have the opportunity to make an impact. And I think when we stay plugged into relationships, and when we stay patient, and we have that long game mentality of knowing that, wherever you are is it's just a moment, it's just a season. And I'm 30 now, which, like, when I talk about it, like,
Hold
feels
on,
so
Niki, you're making us all
innocent.
feel old.
I know.
Let's slow
But
down.
but
Okay.
but truly, like, I think when I was in my 20s, I viewed 30 as kind of this, like, okay, well, you got to arrive, you got to have it all together. And now that I've walked through this season, I have this strong sense that I'm still at the very beginning, and there may be things and callings in my life that I'm not even aware of yet.
That's a good
So
word.
ultimately, I just think, like, realizing that life is long and there's so much opportunity. And I think having this perspective of appreciating where you are in the moment, and knowing and truly just trusting that even moments of pain, even moments of disappointment, loss, suffering, wilderness, like those moments play such a critical part in the way that we can then experience the mountaintops. So yeah, I know that I'm kind of going all over the place with that,
No,
but
that's so good.
I really think that there's so many people who need encouragement, and who just need to hear someone say, stick with it, just, stay plugged into the things that you feel pushed on your heart, and know that in time, the person who needs to be fulfilling the calling that you're feeling, like, that person is being created right now.
That's a really good word. That's great. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to cough. Sorry about that. I remember a season that I felt like in that kind of desert season, and I joke about this with Josh, or I have before. Josh, you can help me remember. There's a book by Henri Nouwen that you gave me when I felt like I was in the desert season, waiting to go where I wanted, like waiting for my calling, my purpose to step into something. What was the title of that book? What do you
Yeah.
remember?
We'll
We're
put
gonna
it in the
figure it
show
out. We'll put it in
notes.
the show notes. We'll make sure that that's on there. So
Yeah, it is a
even
good
if you
book.
feel like you're in that season, we'll give you a resource to be able to really not battle against that, but to lean into that
Yeah.
more than anything. And so, Niki, once again, we could talk all day. We thank you for your time. Once again, she is a leader worth following. So go ahead and follow her on all social channels, not just on Onyx, and see what she is up to. Because I do agree with her that I feel like it's just the beginning for her and for her family. And I can't wait to see what God does in you and through you over the next several years. And once again, the Multiply family is grateful for you and the integral pieces that you've played within our Multiply family. And so, with that being said, this is the end of our Multipliers Leadership Podcast, but we will be back at it here in just a couple of weeks, and we can't wait to see you then.
Thanks,
Nikki,
guys.
thank you so much. Appreciate you.